afternoon, and welcome back to the 40% Better podcast. Here we're talking about all things leadership, definitely focused in the technology world. And Amit has volunteered to come on and be interviewed, and I get to ask him questions, and hopefully it will be some stories that will help you in your leadership journey. And Amit, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Bill. Thank you for inviting me to your podcast. Love what you're doing for the community and would be happy to contribute in any way I can.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I think I told you before, we don't really have a script. I have one question that I ask everybody, which is, what's your origin story? Like, how did you get started doing leadership? Was it something in childhood, or you suddenly just got thrust into the role, or kind of what was the beginning?
So I think, like many other technologists, I started as an individual contributor, right? I mean, and typically what you do is you start as an engineer and you are good at your craft, and then somewhere along the line, what happens is that you have somebody in your organization who basically is looking for help, right? So you start helping that other person out, start taking things which are not on your plate really, and start doing it, and then they eventually like invite you and say that, hey, you've been doing this for some time, is this something which you are interested in doing? And that's how I kind of went into that role. I There was no hierarchical structure really. It was more of companies at a point of time are trying to scale, and when they're trying to scale, they need people who can bring in a thought leadership and help
Mhm.
solve not only technical problems but I think challenges on the human side too. So I think
Right,
that's where you kind of went in in that direction. Yeah.
right. It's interesting because when you're talking about helping people, I think of, part of the path to leadership is by mentoring other people around you. You
Yes.
know, yeah,
Yes.
yeah, and I think that's a good. Um, I, I think mentoring is just a good practice all the time,
Yes.
and yeah,
Absolutely. And uh, I think it kind of starts, at least it started with me, with a feeling to pay it forward, right? So I have been blessed in the sense that I have had extremely helpful leaders or mentors within my organization and outside who've played a decisive influence. And one of the things I kind of felt was that, okay, if this person has had such a profound experience on my career, then I at least owe it to give it back, right? Give it back to my community, give it back to the people who I interact with, and see if I can even make a modicum of difference to their lives or their careers. I'll be happy to do that. Yeah.
right, right. That's yeah. I love that model. That's such a good way of thinking about it, and paying it forward is a on it's selfless, but it's also um, you're kind of looking at the bigger picture, right?
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
not just stuck in these are my tasks and the coding I have to do. It's how do I have a broader impact on the community where I work.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep. Yep.
I love that. That's really good. Um, the first teams that you were leading, was it what were you guys working on?
So I had an interesting journey actually. Um I graduated in computer science, and the first job which I really had was, you won't believe it, was actually writing assembler code for
Oh wow.
airline reservation systems. So these were old archaic 1960 mainframe systems, very monolithic but extremely powerful. And I'm talking about 2.5 decades from now. The only way to solve some of the engineering challenges around these high transaction, high throughput, high availability systems was to get away from all kind of high level languages and code everything, including the application code in assembler. So I
Wow.
started doing that. Yeah. So we used to actually look at dumps of hexadecimal to try and figure out what has gone wrong. So it requires extreme amount of patience, but I learned a lot. I learned the value of writing good code. I learned the engineering paradigm, why there was so much optimization which had to be done in the 60s, because the compute, the memory was so expensive that they had to come out of creative ways of solving some very interesting problems. So it was, I think, more out of curiosity than anything else, where I was fresh out of my college. I was looking for a job, and I simply saw an advertisement where they were trying to solve this problem at a planet scale, and I just felt drawn towards it, and I kind of moved into that role. Yeah.
That is so cool. I got to tell you, I have not spoken to many people who've done assembler. Like that's super rare, you know. Um,
Yeah, you'll find them especially in Dallas area. So there is a large global distribution system, which started as a research and development effort between IBM and American Airlines, and the reservation system called Sabre was born.
oh
And
yeah, yeah.
yeah, so I worked on the Sabre system for almost like 10 years, and before that, for almost like 4 or 5 years, I was working in with Sabre's competitor, which is now, again, it's based out of Colorado. It's called Travelport. So I worked closely with them too. So almost like 15 years, or close to 15 years, in, I think, the airline reservation and the transaction processing space.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, yeah. I remember using Sabre years ago
Yeah.
for yeah, because there was some kind of public facing portal on it, and I think it's because I was traveling out of the country.
Yeah,
Uh,
Travelocity. So they used to have something called Travelocity, and
yeah,
Travelocity in the .com era was a Sabre company. So Sabre was powering the front layer, the and exposing it to the internet
yeah.
cloud, but the traffic was all handled at the back end by a Sabre system.
Nice. Ah, that's so interesting. And nowadays, with cloud computing and you know automatic spinning up of virtual servers and databases and all that, those kinds of problems just don't really exist anymore. You know?
Uh, I would say they don't. So what is happening here is that companies are kind of trying to move away from large monolithic systems, Bill. And
Yeah.
what they're trying to do is definitely look at the value unlocking which happens with hyperscalers. So in case of companies like Sabre, they are actually so I don't work for Sabre anymore. I don't represent
Mhm.
Sabre. So I'm just speaking whatever I'm speaking in this podcast is just my opinion. I do
Sure.
not represent Sabre at all. Or so most of the companies, what they're trying to do is they are the one thing which I think CTOs and CXOs really fear is vendor lock-in, right? They don't want that.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Now, in this case, I think here is a very large company which is doing planet scale ticketing and check-in for the major airlines of the world. Maybe 40% of the aviation traffic in terms of ticketing check-in is being handled by them, but they are heavily locked into the hardware, the infrastructure of IBM, right? And
Mm.
they want to break away from that and move to a hyperscaler, because hyperscalers are probably offering them a much lower total cost of ownership, right? Compared to these large machines which they were working on. But the problem is that as the code grows old, there are challenges in migrating it into an open environment. And this code, I think one of the paradigm which technologists use is, if it ain't broke, don't try and fix it. And that there's a wisdom behind that, right?
Yeah.
Because these systems are sometimes running for decades. They are extremely reliable, And whenever you touch something which is already existing, unless you fully understand the complete impact, changing it is a little risky. Having said that, if there's a cost which you bear, if you don't change it, the cost of not doing anything is also very high, because the people who were maintaining these systems are now retiring, and the folks who are coming in are not interested in doing that kind of coding anymore. So it is,
Right.
it is it they don't, the basic idea is, I think, is the economics, like you said, Bill. So they want to move to these systems. But yes, this problem is pervasive. There is a lot of legacy code out there which is written on monolithic systems. I think especially maybe in the federal government, which are there, which they would definitely want to move off and move on to the hyperscalers. Yeah, so it's there.
Yeah, that's interesting. Um, how big teams have you worked with? A little bit of like, give me some history about the kinds of
Yeah,
teams and
absolutely.
what that was like.
I can
Yeah.
I can talk about that. So essentially, this it's been a spectrum and a growth journey. So I started off with team sizes which were small, more I would say as a leading a pod of 5 to 7 engineers. Then
Hmm.
organically grew, where the max size of people which I was handling, and I was not doing that alone, by the way. I mean, I had a team of managers who were reporting into me,
Hmm.
was a peak size of almost 70 to 75 people. And then gradually moving all across, and the team sizes kept changing. So yeah, the peak team size which I've handled is an organization of around 65 to 70 people.
Nice, nice. Um, Within that context, what kind of challenges did you guys run into?
uh I think all sorts of challenges, right? If you look at the challenges, there are challenges of, I use a very popular framework. It helps me bucket my problems very easily, which is people, process, and technology. That has helped me. A lot of the problems which I have found out are not necessarily technical problems. They are either problems of process, or they're problems of people, right? So you have to figure out a way of how to constructively solve these problems, right?
Yeah, yeah. Um, do you have like a top three list of common people problems?
Oh yeah, I think communication. I think that's the biggest
Uh,
one, which I feel it's on the top of my list, because I think it's not what you say sometime in life, right? It's how you say it. And I have been on the receiving end of that, as well as I have been on the end where I have made those mistakes, right? Where I have said something where I meant it, but maybe the way I messaged it was not exactly right. And so it's a it's a constant challenge, right? You don't want to, and you want to keep the right amount of balance. You don't want to over communicate. At the same time, you don't want to be out of the picture or not available. So I think teams value communication, and I think leaders sometimes, uh, with the bandwidth they have, you know may not do a great job of it. But I think all good leaders which I have met so far, or who have had profound influence, have been excellent at communication. Very, very good at it.
nice. Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I could argue that the most important thing that anybody could do in anywhere in the leadership hierarchy is is get better at communicating. Um, and to me, that's kind of one of those, you're always learning new and better ways to do it. And it's incremental. It's like, oh, what's
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah,
So I think what happens in life is, you learn from experience, and unfortunately, uh, you know, good things come out of in life sometimes out of bad experience, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
so, so
True.
school of hard knocks, right? You
Right,
do something,
exactly.
you get kicked in the butt, and then you that lesson remains with you for a long time. And yeah, ideally, theoretically they say you should learn from other people's experience, but in my case, I learned it all through my own. In 25 years, right, I made mistakes, and the best thing I can hope for is that I don't repeat the same mistake twice, and that's what I try and do, right?
Yeah. No, that's yeah, that totally makes sense. And it's that whole idea of learning from other people's mistakes. It it's great philosophically,
Yeah.
but the reality is it's really hard, because when you're making the mistake, you don't actually have the right pattern recognition
Yeah.
internally to recognize, oh, wait a minute, I'm doing this thing that person said is a really, really bad idea. Um, the flip side to it is that every now and then, doing those mistakes um, actually is the path to success,
Yeah.
right? That's
Yeah.
you know
True.
that's
True.
the like a whole bunch of people. When the first startup that I joined, I had a whole bunch of people that I knew tell me that I was making completely the wrong mistake. What do this is a brand new company. These guys are in a brand new area. They don't like every reason to not join a startup that you could imagine.
Right.
And that company failed. However, I learned so much there. Like
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah.
it was such a rich, fertile environment for knowledge that it gave me all the fuel I needed to get into the next startup that I joined that did really, really well.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
It's
Absolutely.
so um, I tend to think of it as, what am I going to learn? That's kind of
Oh yeah.
always
Oh
my,
yeah. Oh yeah.
what am I going to learn that I can use
Yeah.
next week, next month, next year? Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Uh,
Love that. Love that story, Will. That's
Thank you,
really
thank you. Yeah, that's being in Silicon Valley. You get exposed to a lot of startups,
yeah. Yeah.
and you get exposed to a lot of startup founders,
Yeah.
and you get to hear, the the very few success stories. You get to hear a whole bunch of failure stories,
Yeah.
and then you get to hear some that are like, these guys blah blah blah, and they got acquired as because somebody bigger wanted the team. They got
Right.
acqui-hired, right, for the people, basically.
Right.
Um, but each one of those is, oh, there's a lesson in that. You
Oh
know
yeah. Oh yeah. I'm
what
sure. I'm sure.
what can you pick out of that? And in some ways, because there's so many people that I've met who've been at startups that failed, it's there's no shame.
Oh
It's
yeah. Yeah.
it's like almost everybody I know has
Yeah.
been at a startup that failed,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
if they haven't, like people who've only ever worked at big companies,
Right.
you know, I I worry about their decision making process.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I would agree. So I think that's a very sharp observation, a little bit. So I think big companies have their own challenges.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes when organizations grow to a level, they definitely have more well-defined roles. They kind of become like bureaucracies, right? Because it becomes the
Yeah.
size is so difficult that you cannot manage it unless you have some system in place, right? So the creative juices may not flow that well, or reaction times may be a little low, or the incentive to innovate may not be there. So
Hmm.
I think that's great experience, and some of the people I have worked with, they are not technologists, but they have done great in their careers because of the startup experience. I mean, I know a very good friend of mine who started a food-related startup and in India, and it failed. It did not work out. He had two startups related to food where they were trying to solve this problem in India. They bombed. But then the third time, I think the experience he carried himself, the lessons he learned with respect to procurement, supply chain, sourcing, was absolutely mind blowing, because it was not possible to accrue that kind of experience in 3 years time. It would have taken at least 15 if he was working a regular job in a company. So yeah,
Mm,
absolutely, that
yeah,
resonates with
yeah, yeah. It's that learning acceleration um,
Yep, yep,
process.
yep.
Yeah, yeah. That's such a good,
Absolutely.
yeah. And the stats are that um, was it? It's like 80% of businesses fail before the 5-year mark, just
Yeah, yeah,
across
true.
the board. And it doesn't matter whether you bootstrap or you get angel or VC funding. Um, yeah, that's like but you get to learn from it. You know,
Yep,
that's
yep, yep,
the
yep.
that's the biggie. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's so. It's so interesting to hear other stories of other people who they've had a couple failures and then the success has arrived. You know,
Yep, yep,
it's you have to be persistent. That's
yep,
part
yep,
of the game, right?
yep,
Is
yep, yep.
is you got to be willing to be persistent. Um, in your history, with companies, what are like with communication specifically? Are there any? You mentioned that your framework of people and processes and technology. When we're thinking about communication, because I agree that's such a critical piece of this puzzle. Um, do you have any frameworks there or like standard operating practices that you use around communication?
Uh, I think I try and put some structure. I think that's what I try to do. So with every person which depending on my team size, right? I
Mhm.
definitely try and make sure I communicate with individual teams at least once a fortnight, minimum, right? So if I have 5 teams or 10 teams, then once in 2 weeks I would like to just hear from them and see what's going on.
Yep.
If the span of control is very high, doing a skip level is extremely hard. I'm not able to do it as much as I would like to do, but I do feel there is value in having open houses and in town halls. I think there is definitely value in that. And I think as a leader, one should be open to critical questioning, right? So
Yeah.
if hard questions are asked, don't shy away from them, take them head on. uh, and I think the most important takeaway from for me sometimes is that email sometimes is not the best form of communication, especially if the typed word, depending on how the person in which context they're seeing it, may convey a completely different. It is the fastest, most efficient way of communicating, but you have to be careful what you say and understand. So I am a big fan, if possible within bandwidth, to have multimodal. So if I feel there's a communication where email may not be the best, I would probably just message the person and say, hey, can we have a quick 5-minute connect, and I just want to clean the air around this, right? So that it doesn't lead to it doesn't spiral into something it isn't meant to be. So I think that is just
I
rules
like
of.
that.
I don't have a framework, but yeah, that's what I try and follow.
You're what you're describing there really actually is a framework, which is awesome. It's you have this unconscious competency, which is beautiful. Um, one of them is recognizing that face-to-face communication gets you a whole level of communication and input that you just can't get out of an email, right?
Oh, absolutely. You don't know the facial expression of the person, you don't know the body language, you
Right.
don't know how they're. So there's immense value actually in working from. So I know post COVID, lots of people love working from home, and believe me, I am a fan of it too, because as a technologist or as a researcher, there is deep value in doing focused work. You have no
Yep.
interruptions. You can block a piece of work and go intensely into one area and just research. it's excellent. You feel, you are in a flow state, and I love that, right? There's no
Yeah.
interruption, nothing. However, there is a downfall to it also. There is, I wouldn't say downfall. I think as an engineer or architect, it's a trade-off. The trade-off is when you have new people in your team who are struggling, and they're struggling even with
Yeah.
focus time. How do you solve that?
Right.
Right?
Right.
How do you do brainstorming? Sometimes the best ideas in life come from others, right? You hear something from them, and you cross pollinates in your mind some problem you were trying to solve, and lo and behold, right, a 2-minute conversation has solved something for you which you've been struggling for days. So I
Yeah.
think definitely there is value in hybrid work. Yeah, I feel, I mean I was initially very unhappy with companies moving to back to office, but I now see
Mhm.
value in that, because especially with new folks joining who are don't feel part of the crowd or part of the tribe, you have to
Yeah.
initiate it. They have to feel part of it, right? And unless you have that, unless you have those meetings, those brown bag lunches, or discuss about a bug which you've solved overnight over a pizza and coke, how will you learn? It's very difficult to do that remotely.
Yeah. 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 The bonding thing is it's so important. And I've worked with distributed teams uh, for 20 years. I got started pretty early in the cycle of having distributed teams, and yeah, that's a key thing. From a leadership perspective, is really putting a lot of attention on getting that cohesion, and
Oh
how do
yeah.
we and how do we get everybody working really well together, since we're not all within Nerf ball distance of each other,
Right, right.
and so I put a lot of time and effort into setting things up so that we would have conversations about whatever it was we were doing, and uh, and really thinking about how do you foster that communication, um, and getting people to feel comfortable as part of the team. They're part of the tribe.
Yep, 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 yep.
Yeah, that's such an important. And I think back to your people, process, technology approach, getting the people to feel, getting the psychological safety to happen of
Yeah.
all the people being together is, I think that's underappreciated by a lot of people.
Oh yeah.
And I think it's an expensive I think it's an expensive mistake when people don't appreciate that. Um, and it's, yeah, I think more conversations about that. I think just to raise people's awareness and perspective
Right.
of the importance of that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because yeah,
So,
it's so important. Yeah,
absolutely, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. You're
yeah,
right.
yeah. I always, for me, I always think about what are the things that will help my team perform better,
Mhm.
and psychological safety is one of the big three for me.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because I think, uh, to your point, Bill, um, fear is such an important emotion, right? It's such a powerful emotion that it hijacks your brain, and then your all other emotions just they fall apart, right?
Right,
Love, sympathy, kindness, logical thinking, everything goes for us. It just falls sideways if fear is in control in your life,
right,
right, or in
right.
your team.
Yeah,
Yeah, then
yeah,
then problems will not surface up. They will remain latent or hidden. People will be frustrated. They'll be silent, quitting. All sorts of problems, right? So
right, right. Yeah, yeah. It's interesting because very rarely do I hear people say that out loud.
yeah, that's
So
true. That's true.
yeah, yeah. That's yeah. It's very good. Here we go. Um, God, now I'm like, how do you have any systems or techniques that when you see that somebody's afraid, like how do you help them unwind that?
I I think I try and give them space. So sometimes I know that in a large forum, folks will be uncomfortable, or they may not be open to asking questions. So what I try and do is schedule a block a time in my calendar and keep it open for anyone to schedule, like 15 minutes, or if they are not comfortable doing it, have a coffee chat with them somewhere outside the office. If they are not comfortable doing it in the office, I have it that way. I mean, I try and do that, have coffee chats or do it. Sometimes people are not comfortable raising things in front of, or in the office. They see that's being observed by other people, so they are not open to it. So I try and do it that way. that
I
is
like
that
that.
is one one thing I try and do. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's yeah. I think that's a good. That's a great model because yeah, it's where do they feel comfortable
Right.
and
Right.
relaxed and safe? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, Starbucks is a great place. Go there, have a cup of coffee, and talk about whatever you need to. And of course, time is limited, so it's not that I would say, am I available for everyone? No, I'm not. But yeah, I do try and schedule some time where I can make time for my team and make sure that I'm approachable as much as I can within the constraints in which I operate.
Um, how do you? I think a lot about behavioral replication. Like,
Yeah.
if I'm running teams of teams, how do I get all the team leads to operate the same way that my head operates? Because I want to clone myself out to make sure that everybody else is focusing on psychological safety. Do you have any kind of system for training your direct reports on that?
Um, to be honest, no. Not even thought about it. And I don't know if I would want them to be clones of me. I would actually wish that they are their own, right? But what I would like to do is the point which you raised, Bill, which is mentor them, right? Show them the direction, and then tell them that, look, this is a loose framework, which people
Mm-hmm.
with who I met across in my life influenced me. Use it. If you like it, adopt it. If you don't like it, modify it, or change it the way you need to,
Mm-hmm.
so that you feel more fulfilled and effective.
Nice. Yeah, I maybe because I grew up in competitive sports,
Mm.
um, and I always think about the nuanced optimizations of the team,
Oh yeah. Oh,
and
I get you. Okay.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah, and yeah.
no, absolutely. So I think, see, a playbook is important. So absolutely, I know what you are getting at. So I think with respect to, let's say, technical development, or with respect to work which you are doing, review guidelines, absolutely, I think that has to be standardized, and
Hmm.
you want to make sure that there is a standard with which the team is operating. So on that, absolutely, yes, there has to be a playbook. There has to be strategies with respect to best practices which we need to adopt, when we are developing code. And I'm a big proponent of that, and that falls into the process bucket. So there are, like, process safeguards which we have. We want to make sure that when we are developing code at scale, the leads are doing like a Vulcan mind meld and making sure that the 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 playbook is as kosher as possible, so that if there are outages which have happened, or if there are things where things have gone wrong, then we are able to learn from each other's mistakes more rapidly. And absolutely, there is value in that. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. It's so interesting as you're talking about processes, and I'm thinking about different places that I've been at, and the the scale that went from no process, it was whatever I made up in the moment,
Right. Right.
you know, to so much process that we can't get anything done,
E-
at the other end of the spectrum,
Absolutely, you are right. And you want enough looseness in it, so that it is adaptable. You don't want a straight
Yeah.
jacket. Now, if you are in an organization where that is required, you absolutely should. And there are organizations where you need it, right? You want somebody to just craft the book and execute it, and you see examples of that in the armed forces, right? In any country,
Hmm.
there's a very strict reason for it, because if people start innovating on the battlefield, it can have very bad consequences. So
Sure.
you need a chain of command, you need a person on the top who thinks through, and then you execute with precision.
Right.
uh,
Right.
uh, yeah, but otherwise you need, and there is value in that, right? If you have a large number of people you want to march, but those organizations and the goals are very different, right? So in creative
Right.
fields that may not work out, is
Yeah.
is, is what I feel.
Yeah. Airlines is probably a great example of
Oh yeah.
because you got airplanes flying through the air, and all this infrastructure that has to work with them,
Oh yeah. Oh,
and
yeah.
so the if you make a small tweak here, uh, like my baggage could end up on the other side of the planet, which
Yeah.
would really be when I'm
Yeah.
here, um,
Absolutely, absolutely, and
yeah,
and that has consequences, right? In
yeah,
departure control systems, in our air traffic control systems, which are there, which FAA definitely has some governance around it. Aircraft safety, for example, right? It has to go through immense amount of process and certification.
right.
Pharmaceuticals, when you are, launching drugs for a population as large as the United States, you,
Hmm.
the problem with those things is the recovery cost is huge, right? The
Sure.
blowback is huge. In software, if I load something bad, I can recover, I can do a fallback within seconds. All is good.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
imagine you launch a drug and then you realize that it has debilitating side effects on the person who took it,
right, right.
and you did not catch that, right? So
Yeah,
you can destroy lives there.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think it's understanding the context of the playing field, is
Yeah,
is is what we're talking about. And maybe that's part of the reason that I like startups so much,
yeah.
is because no matter what we do, nobody's dying. Like that's
Yeah,
kind of been my,
yeah,
when I
true,
was
true.
in college, I was a first responder, and there was lots of situations where I'm like, I got to do this right, or there's going to be a fatality, right?
Oh yeah,
And
yeah,
so
right.
so it's so moving out of there into the startup world, I'm like, nothing stresses me. It's like,
Oh yeah,
you know,
you
we blew up the servers. Okay,
you
great, no big
you
deal.
you took stress for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, right? So
Yeah, I'm like, it's
you're
um,
absolutely right. Yeah.
okay, so we were offline and we lost revenue for an hour, but nobody died. Is kind of
Yeah,
the way
yeah,
that
yeah.
my
That
my head works. Um,
right.
and I really try to get my team to be like, okay, nobody has to panic. Like, everybody
Yeah.
has crashed servers. Everybody has had their systems go down. Like, everybody's had problems. Everybody survives.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
this is not ER surgery that we're doing here. So, we're going to be okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
you're right. You're right.
yeah.
Yeah.
But, and I think, in the startup world, I think that's part of the beauty of it, is that generally speaking, you're not, unless you're in, advanced medical something or another,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know,
Correct. Correct.
which is super, super niche.
Yeah.
Um, it's not as much of a concern.
Yeah. And,
Um,
and 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 those products go through extensive certification, right? No
right,
government in the world will rush them, right? You have a
right,
long drawn
yeah,
process of testing, and before you even can launch it, right? So the
yeah,
risk of something going bad is not zero, but mostly the pharma companies and the FDA will try and do their best to make sure that it's almost zero.
right, right, yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's yeah, to your point, way more rigorous
Oh
um,
yeah.
QA processes is what
Oh
we're
yeah.
hoping.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Oh yeah.
through all that stuff. It's kind of like, crash testing cars.
Oh
When you
yeah. Oh yeah. Oh
manufacture a
yeah.
car, there's a bunch of engineering to make sure that if you wreck it, you can get out and
Yeah.
walk away.
Yeah.
You know?
Correct, correct. And
Yeah.
that's one of the things which as an engineer I think of, right? The correction cost of engineering. Like, okay, let's say you build a dam, okay, in a community, and you don't build it properly, it breaches, you wipe out a complete village or a town or an entire state
Right.
if it's done poorly, right?
Yeah.
Whereas in software, like you said, right, what do you do? Yes, there was a glitch, it impacted certain number of people. The correction cost in some of the other engineering disciplines is far more higher,
Right.
far more
Right.
higher.
Yeah. Yeah. This is a risk assessment kind of thought process, you know, and a willingness to accept, oh yeah,
Yeah,
here's the
yeah.
potential, and 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 a much higher willingness to experiment, um,
Right.
and see. It's interesting. I always think about. Do you remember reading The Innovator's Dilemma by Clay Christensen?
No, but if you recommend, I'll definitely read it.
Yeah. So
Uh,
so so, so Clay Christensen was a prof at MIT or Harvard or Yale, one of those schools, and he wrote this book about how this pattern that he saw in companies where they would come out with something super innovative, disrupt a marketplace, get to be huge, and then they become stagnant. And then someone else comes in, has an innovation, disrupts the marketplace, and that big company dies, right? So, the classic example is Blockbuster, right?
oh
You know,
yeah, that's true.
Blockbuster could have acquired Netflix, or they could
Right,
have built their own streaming service, but they said,
correct.
no, no, everybody's going to want DVDs, and now Blockbuster's gone.
It's nowhere.
Um,
Nowhere.
and
You are
there's
right.
all HP did this, um, Silicon Graphics did it. Nobody even knows who they are anymore.
Correct.
Um,
Correct.
Xerox did it.
Yes.
You know,
Yes. These are all very big names, very powerful
yeah,
names, actually.
and they were huge, but now they're way way smaller if they're even are still around. And
True. Very true.
and so it's always, what's the balance between the risk, let's go experiment on this thing, and versus the no, let's stay safe. And
Right. Right.
it's such an interesting, I think Apple is, the big companies, I think they've done a really good job of taking risks and experimenting.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Over the years they've experimented, and they've experimented on stuff and gone, like, put billions of dollars in, and then been like, nope, we're not gonna
Right.
do that,
Right.
um
Right.
but that's because they're making enough money with the other stuff
Right.
that they
Right.
can take that risk, and they're like, it's not the end of the world if it
Right.
doesn't
If
play
it
out.
doesn't work out. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And that's such a, um it's so interesting because, I think of, like, do you remember Yahoo? you
Oh
know
yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yahoo was huge, and
Right.
then now they're gone. you know
They're gone.
um
They're gone.
and there's all these different, in the last 25-30 years, there's been all these companies that have gotten huge. They've stopped innovating, basically, because
Right.
they've gotten way too much process, and then they disappeared. and
Oh yeah.
and
Oh yeah.
yeah, it's just, I'm always fascinated by how that happens versus the companies where it doesn't happen. Like, Amazon has done a really good job of,
Right.
they keep, there's, like, they're curious, and they're experimenting, and they're trying a new thing, and sometimes it works, like AWS,
Right.
amazing, right?
Right. Right.
Or their streaming video service, which is doing really well.
Right.
And
Right.
sometimes they completely crater, and they throw away billions of dollars, like the Amazon phone, right?
Yeah. True.
You know,
True. 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 True.
and yeah, so that somehow they've got this risk acceptance and curiosity kind of
Yeah.
focus, um, which, how do you keep that? You know?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. I think a lot of it flows down from the DNA of the co-founders, really.
Mm,
And I think
yeah.
if that is part of the culture, then that kind of keeps the company alive, right? So
Right.
Google, case in point, right? Two researchers at Stanford University, and what
Yep.
did they come up with? They were doing their PhD research, and they were trying to look at citations of academic papers, and they said that look, well cited papers are you know are much more prevalent versus less cited papers, because probably there's a wider interest in it rather than just keyboard stuffing, and that led to this idea of page rank, and they deployed it at scale, and Google became what it is now. And then
Right.
I think those ideas have kind of led to more products, right? And they've not sat on their butt just with search and making money. Had they been doing that, we would not have seen Google Maps, we would not have seen Google Translate. So I think somewhere the creative juices are flowing. They are hiring curious people. So I think one of the things which I would recommend and which I feel is extremely important in life is to have a childlike curiosity, right, on what's going on around you, not just in tech, but with everything around you, right? How is a pizza baked? How are these noodles made? How does this game of football work, right? What's going on here, right? How is this quarterback thinking what he's thinking? I think those things help you a lot
Hmm.
to, and sometimes that cross pollination helps you solve problems, because a lot of problems in life are not solved by your current field. You have to borrow something from another field to be able to solve that problem. You will not
Yeah.
be able to do it. You will get tunnel vision, but if you look at, uh, uh, you know, um, try to see problems which are from some other areas and then try and solve it. So one thing which I don't know if you've heard of it. It's something called trees, TRIZ. It's called the theory of
Oh,
inventive problem solving, and it was popularized in the Soviet Union. And if you look at the Soviet era, right, the Soviet era, I'm talking about the area when the space race started, when they started launching programs like Sputnik, which were they were the first ones to send man in space, right, before the
right.
US.
Right.
One of the reasons they were able to do that is that they had this person who was working in their patent office, and he developed this technique where he realized that you can solve problems more effectively if you borrow from other fields. And I see that pattern, right? If you look at artificial intelligence, it is borrowed from the field of neurochemistry, neurobiology. And the neural network or the neural structure actually is how our brain works. And that has been kind of activated through mathematics and then applied here to solve problems. So I think the key to solving some very interesting, very challenging problems is by looking outside your field, not in your
Right.
current field.
Yeah. No, I love that. You said TRIZ,
Yeah, it's called trees.
trees. Okay. And what is it short for?
It's Russian, and I don't know. It's called the theory of inventive problem solving. So that in Russian, it is. I won't be able to pronounce it.
Okay. Okay. I'll have to Google it after the call and go
Yeah,
find it. Yeah, I
yeah,
love that idea because certainly in my experience, I've seen the knowledge from that thing that made this functional and successful, right? It's like
yeah.
this blending and it. I'm trying to remember who. There's an author, and I'm completely forgetting who it was. It might have been Scott Adams, who does the Dilbert cartoons,
Yeah.
talking about how the reason he's successful at Dilbert is that he has this unusual skill set that other people don't have, and he's not amazing at anything, but that he has these skills from different areas that he puts together, and because of that, he's able to create Dilbert where nobody else can because
Oh
they
yeah.
don't have
Yeah.
his unusual skill stack, right? And I think that's such a,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
extremely hard to write. I mean, I think humor and observation. So I think the reason why his cartoons are so great because I think he is inspired by life.
yeah,
I think he's
yeah,
inspired by life, and every day he finds something unique and he's able to give it a flavor. So I think that is what makes it extremely relatable.
yeah,
Yeah, but this you I think there was a course in Caltech where they used to teach trees um, for something called psychological inertia. So what happens is your brain fogs up, right? You're not able to solve the problem because you just think in a certain direction. So when you look at that, I think that helps you. And there are books by, I think, by people like, interestingly, mathematicians, right? Which I read, which was there's a book by there was a famous mathematician called Polya, and he wrote a book how to solve it. And if you look at that book, it's actually hardcore mathematics which is trying to solve. But if you look beneath the book and try and understand that book, you uncover cognitive patterns which you can use when you're trying to solve engineering problems, which you can apply anywhere. It's not necessarily in mathematics. You can apply that into a problem which you are trying to solve, or a optimization issue which you are trying to look at, and that can help. It can give you the necessary nudge in that direction and help you solve that problem a lot faster. It gives you the scaffolding, right? It won't
right,
teach you how to solve the problem. It'll
right,
give you the
right.
tools, really. That's what
Yeah,
it'll do.
yeah. No, I love that because, it's like the more, the more different kinds of things I learned in my tech career, the easier it was to solve new problems because I'm like, oh, this problem, new problem is 60% like a problem that I solved 15 years ago,
Oh yeah, 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 yeah,
right?
yeah,
So the
yeah.
pattern match is like, oh, that part I don't have to think about because
Yeah,
I know how to do that, right? The next part, okay, that's where we all of a sudden, it's like, oh,
yeah,
that's going to be the hard part, right? And sometimes it's like you look at it and you're like, well, I've already done 90% of this,
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
That I think you bring an important point, and that's why I love the job which I do, which is more of consultative tech selling now, because you have to do rapid context switching. I mean, you're solving a
Right,
problem for oil and gas, then you're moving on to a big four tech company which is doing hardcore research. You have to context switch to a telecom carrier, and then you move to a pharmaceutical company. Now in a small boutique firm you can do all of that. If you go to a large McKinsey, the problem is you'll get slotted into a vertical, and that vertical becomes your home for the rest of your life, and you will not
right.
learn as much if you cross pollinate, right? So it's
Yeah,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah. I think because I'm a little bit ADHD, I really like the I like the diversity of the problem solving. You know,
Right.
chasing down problems for me is super fun. Like
Oh
I
yeah. Oh
really,
yeah.
I love doing that, and being able to go, oh wait a minute, I get to pull in these different pieces from different areas to solve that kind of a problem. The
Yeah.
synthesis of the solution is fun, and the flip side to it is I've got to make sure that I'm not overrunning my team, and that when there's a problem, I'm like, okay, here's the problem. What do you guys all think? Right? I'm not going to say anything until they all, because it may be that the thing that I think I've got 85% solved is actually a bad solution from
That
15
is
years
true.
ago.
That
You
that's
know,
true. That's true.
and I shouldn't actually say that out loud because I'll be laughed out of the room. Right?
Yeah.
That's the reality of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so, they come up with stuff, and I'm like, oh, their solution's way better than mine was.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and so, but I just love that it's, I think it's the challenge I enjoy
Yeah.
the challenge, and the part of it's the, like the intellectual, the cognitive load of figuring it out
Yeah.
is it's fun. Which-
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that kind of you bring an important point when I'm hiring people, right? Um, One thing which I look for definitely is one of my key things which I try and measure is their curiosity index, right? Their curiosity
Mhm.
quotient. Everybody measures uh, intelligence, intelligence quotient and emotional quotient, but I have my own curiosity quotient. I try and find out how curious are they about things,
Right.
right? Do they have that bone and of course, uh, it should be that curiosity ultimately leads them to developing something concrete, which
Yeah.
I try to look at. But yeah, that's an interesting point which you bring.
Yeah. Yeah. And I get that there's some people that they just they don't want to create the solution. They don't want to ideate on, it's an intellectual. They just want to be told, go write this block of code, you know,
Uh,
and they're kind of widgets.
Correct. Correct. And I think it's like the five fingers in the hand, right? Not there's diversity, right? And
Right.
so
Right.
I think one thing as a leader you have to do is try and use that diverse set of people and then map them to specific functions where they would be most successful
Yeah.
and try and see whether that's a good fit, right? If you take a person who's highly creative and put them into a road job, that's
Yeah.
the sure shot way of killing their career, killing their ambition, killing motivation, and yeah, it will not work out. You're right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's it goes back to intrinsic motivation
Yeah,
is,
yeah,
and that's, I always think about helping my people to get more psychological safety, um, and more intrinsic motivation is the second thing that I'm trying to, like,
yeah,
always, um, make sure that I'm helping them go in whatever direction that is, um, even if it means they have to leave my team. If
oh yeah,
someone's
oh
like,
yeah, oh yeah.
I'm super curious about blah 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 that team is doing, I'm like, okay, let's figure out how to make it happen.
No,
Um,
that's great. I think that is such a profound thing which you said, because a lot of leaders will actually sandbag talent, right? They will just make sure that nobody
yes.
else poaches their team, and they are super protective of it, because I think the cost of hiring, retraining, motivating somebody is so high. Sometimes the leaders, they don't want to do that, but for a very for a very selfish reason, or I would say a
Right.
self-preserving reason, which is fine. I mean, you want to do that, but at the end of it, if it ends up in a burnt out individual or a person who's then not motivated or quietly quits, then you have a problem at your hand, right? So
Right.
you don't want that.
Right. And yeah, and I think part of also what people don't think through on that is, how does the rest of the team feel, because they know that Mary wants to move to a different team and work on something different. And if I'm
Right.
blocking that, then the rest of the team is like, oh, Bill
No,
sucks as a leader, you
yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah, you
And
should not, you
so,
should not
yeah.
do that.
And,
Yeah,
so again, this is like, I'm looking just from a higher perspective
yeah,
of, oh, if everybody knows that I'm totally behind their careers going however they want them to go,
yeah, yeah.
then number one, they're going to tell me. Number two,
Right.
they know I'm going to support them. And number three, they're going to be really happy working for me, because they're like, Bill's got our back on my career
Right.
progression,
Absolutely.
right?
And
Yeah.
no, you're absolutely right, Bill. And what I've seen in companies is, good news spreads fast, but
Yeah.
bad news spreads three times faster,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so you, so you have to be careful, right? As a
Right.
leader,
Right.
because you're on the spotlight, right? And
Right.
people observe you. You are observed. You're seen. Your words which you speak, the way you dress, everything is observed, but that doesn't mean you play to the gallery. You don't have to. If you are convinced that see, as a leader, that's what I feel. You are not there to please people at the end of the
Right.
day, right? In any company, in any system, you are there to get results, and you would want to have a happy and satisfied team under you to make sure that you reach there, right?
Right.
So
Right.
you should try and you know de-risk or defang anything which comes in between them and their ability to do quality work. I think
Right.
that's most important as a manager.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, um, I'm really glad to hear you say that because I don't always hear people say that. And it always makes me nervous when they're, when, when they just don't, that's not a conscious thought in their head. Um, and I think I'm lucky because one of my first founders made a comment that to me, and I think in the moment he didn't really. To him, I think it was completely obvious, but to me, it was super profound that the velocity of the company was dependent on the velocity of my software team, and that
Oh,
everything I could do to make them happy and higher performing was the game, right? And his job as the founder was to make sure that I had whatever I needed to make that happen. And
I think that's a very, very important thing, right? Because um, in look at it now, right? I sometimes feel the best breakthroughs will come with two or three 17-year-olds in a lab somewhere or a basement somewhere in the United States who have a fantastic idea, and they may crack something which a team of researchers have not been able to do.
right,
Right. So
yeah,
I think go to market is becoming very, very important, especially with with I think vibe coding there, and I've seen it in action, right? Especially with ideas and greenfield implementation, it can
mm-hmm.
accelerate your go to market significantly, right?
Right,
So that I think it is important that I think that point which you are making is now extremely profound and extremely important, where I think the key thing is, can you ship a workable product and then refine it later, but then get to the market first? So absolutely, I think that way the velocity, because if you are beaten to it by somebody else, uh, you lost
yeah.
it.
This has been super awesome. I really appreciate the time and everything. I'm going to stop the recording. And yeah, this has been great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.